So good afternoon. Yes, so Julia Eickert already spoke about the activities a little bit of Q2 within the Interfaces program, but I can speak a little bit more about the residencies and then also about the festival. One of our first steps in the Interfaces network that preceded the development of the festival program was to formulate an open call directed to artists, practitioners, theorists, and educators working in the field of sound and music to submit projects including site-specific and participatory strategies for residencies of each 1 to 2 months. We were particularly interested in artistic projects that looked at ways to connect to the city, experimental modes of producing knowledge, and discursive or educational formats. So we had a variety of very different proposals that were also surprising for us. And among those we selected 11. That opened up unusual perspectives in relation to the topic and that were especially focused on a process-based practice rather than on a predefined end product. Because in this way the work became more accessible and participative from the beginning and could adapt to the context and to the circumstances of the place. Each project also demanded a specific framework that we had to actively participate to finding the right partners and spaces, individuals and communities to connect with, which was of course also an interesting challenge for us. And all of the artists worked on formats of presentation that were outside of their and also our usual sphere, leaving their own comfort zone to actively engage with possible audiences new to the field. So I would like to just present 2 of the 11 residencies projects. One is by an Antwerp-based activist, performer and artist called Marthe van Dessel, aka Bolwerk. The title of this project is Crystalling, an open lab format in which participants build up a collective expertise with the aim of growing electrical crystals for use in homemade radio technology. So she hosted several open lab sessions throughout the residency in 3 different places and contexts in collaboration with the organization Nadine, and this is the session on the boat that you can see on the photo. They navigated on the Canal of Brussels in the canal zone where also Q2 is situated. Then another place was this Brussels World Trade Center and organization Constant. You can see where they grew the crystals. The crystals grew very well, as you can see on the picture. And the Brussels World Trade Center is one of the these spaces that was temporarily used by organizations and artists, and it does not exist anymore, for example, unfortunately. Then the other picture was during a festival, at Wolke, and it was especially an open lab session for children. Yeah, so the lab was really open and free for everybody, amateurs and experts, adults and children, and the participation was free and sessions were open to everyone regardless experience. On the picture you can see, no, that I already said. So the results of the research were also published on the website that she specifically made for the project. Another project was by Paulo Dantas. It's called Between Flanders and Wallonia, the effort to be modified by the field. He's a Brazilian composer and teacher, and he immersed himself in the city and communicated only in local languages. avoiding to speak English. So it was an attempt to let the artist's own body be shaped by the experiences of the local languages. And in Brussels there are more than 100 unofficial languages spoken, so it was really a challenge for him. And a way to incorporate certain traces and aspects of the place of the processes of the city of Brussels. And yeah, also to put himself in a position of a foreigner where he could not use his own language and not having the same skills than the other. He developed then also a site-specific intervention in public space that we also implemented in the festival. And yeah, the same was for all the other artists in residence, that we showed their works in the festival. So this is the flyer of the festival. It is the visual identity. It happened last year during 10 days and involved over 50 artists, practitioners, theorists, and educators working in the field of sound and music. And one of the most important aspects of this festival was the collaboration with local partners and spaces. The symposium and the workshops were organized in collaboration with RITS, School of Arts, which was a way to connect to youngsters, students, and academics in sound and radio art. The concerts and performance programs happened each time in different places throughout the city near the Canal Zone, from artist-run off spaces like a hangar or an old soap factory, an old brasserie, a scenographer's atelier, to an independent cinema, a church, a center for media art, and a museum of industry and labor. The context of and atmosphere of each space influenced the concert program and gave also ideas to the formats of presentation. And in most of the places, the artists worked or asked to work really in the space before, so they could adapt to the architectonical and acoustic properties of the space, because it shapes the presentation, of course. Yes, I'm running out of time because I wanted to show. Huh? The video is 3 minutes, actually. Yeah, because there are just some photos. So the Curator was focused on works by Eliane Radic. Cinema Nova, the program on light and color. We had specific themes for each evening. Church, Jean-Baptiste concert on resonance. And La Fonderie, this museum, outside in situ performance in between. Yes, so now the video. It's just an extract of the first 3 days of the festival and just some extracts of concerts and interviews.
Okay, this seems weird. here at Wien, sound is always related to or connected to the space.
You're looking for a kind of energy, a disturbance, or some kind of projection into the space or the situation or the event.
Yeah, like event as a organic process. When space become time, that's an exciting moment. No?
And I just want to say we will do another edition this year of the festival, but it will be in the form of a radio marathon, also due to the very, very reduced budget. And I want to invite everybody to maybe look at the documentation. It's around 30 minutes online.
I wanted to introduce a bit ICTUS before starting to explain about Liquid Room, which is a project we could realize through the Interfaces project. ICTUS is a group of musicians based in Brussels, as already said, creating music. I don't say an ensemble, as we evolved from this more classical ensemble format to, as I said, a group of musicians. I didn't say neither contemporary music, because yes, we were starting playing contemporary music in the definition of coming out of that classical music and doing creation there, but I think we moved also to a more broader and wider variety of music projects. Important to say, I think, to understand Liquid Room is that ICTUS was born on the performing arts stage. It's 25 years ago now. It was in a production of Wim van de Keibus, a choreographer. And till today, we continue to play maybe half of our productions in collaboration with mostly performing artists, choreographers, also visual artists, or we did projects that had a very performative aspect. Even if we did purely musical projects, I think the preferences of ICTUS went mostly to collaboration with composers, for example, that integrated also this performativity in their work. I'm mentioning here Georgia Pergis, Philly Day, Thierry de May, who created music for Wim van de Keibus, but out of that came quite an important piece that is still now played all over out of that context of the performing arts, but has, as said, this performative quality. From these origins in the performative space, I should mention there also, of course, André Keersmaker, Motelpadek, probably names you know. ICTUS moved also into the realm of the classical music, or in the purely music projects, which was not so evident. We came a bit from the side door, you could say. The group of musicians came not together with an ambition to be a music group, but rather to accompany or to respond to the ideas of performing artists. I think until today, and also to understand where Liquid Room comes from, and the reflection that is behind, or the evolution that is behind, that is really important to say. Another aspect that was there from the beginning, and it's maybe related, is the interest for electronics, for amplified music. Again, if I said we are not maybe a classical ensemble at the origin, it's also because there was so much attention for the sound engineer, who was an official and artistic part of the group, and the many projects we did with electronics. So from this background, we were always confronted with different production models, different audience relations, communications that exist in these different sectors of the arts. I'm talking mainly here about difference between the classical music sector, which we introduced a bit from the side door, as said, and the very vibrant performing arts scene that emerged throughout Europe in the late 80s, beginning of the 90s, exactly the moment also where ICTUS started its activities. So this to introduce what background this format Liquid Room has. It was a kind of intuitive way to combine the strengths of these different art practices, together with a certain geology towards sectors like the pop rock, electronic jazz, or music that have found so different ways, according to us, to connect and identify with their audiences. And I refer in that context to a book probably everybody has read or should read, if not done yet. That's David Byrne, How Music Works. I think it describes very well how these different styles of music, how these different economies find their codes to connect and to identify each other between artists and audiences. So this on the background was the start to invent a first liquid room. It's quite some time ago, but as said last year, we could really develop it further in a way that I hope gave us some insights in how we could innovate, that word, the very classical frontal way of playing music. So it's an idea or a format that moves out of this, this architecture and the coding of a classical concert. What is liquid room then? So there's no frontal stage. That's maybe the first element. There's a multi-stage setup. So imagine an open space. It always depends where we go and in the venue and the possibilities of the venue. But this has gives many possibilities. First of all, freedom of audience to move. The more cozy the bar is next door, and the more you give audience the possibility to go there, the more it's a decision from them to stay. So that's opening the door to an active listening. I mean, if you don't want to stay, go. It's a different approach, I think, than being in the middle of a large row of 40 seats, and you're bored, and you can't, and you have to, and so on. So trying to get rid of this. Of course, we hope everybody stays. But it's no problem if they go take a pint and come back, or if they don't come back even. So that's the first thing, multi-stage, so audience can freely move. Second element, it's always with guests, always with friends, musicians, ensembles. We always relate to the local context. It's in that sense, and that will come back further, always a dialogue in the setup of the project. The multi-stage has another big advantage. It makes the performance or the evening fluid in that sense that we wanted to get rid of this very technical changes between pieces. So everybody knows 20-minute piece, and then certainly in contemporary music a big shift and technicians and coughing and checking mails, and then we go on for the first, and that is something not working, and then to avoid this and to have a very liquid way of developing the performance, this multi-staging helps us to prepare on one stage while on the other stage people are still playing. It helps us also, of course, to play with the space. We could do it quadraphonic, we could be all on one, we could do solo, we could four together. All these possibilities are also open. Maybe also, if I say it's always with guests, and it's not purely musical guests that we invite. Many times we invite also visual artists or performing artists or dancers and so on and so on. Again, this open space helps us then to develop different formats or to respond to the needs of a specific work. So it's one fluid happening in which you can pop in or out, in which you can focus. So that's then another element, this active decision to be there. You can come very close, you can keep an overview, you can somehow find your perspective in what's happening. And this opens also in what we call a kind of polyphony of listening. You can lay down and have an immersive listening, you can have a structural, analytic listening, you can also just kind of a superficial zapping and collecting impressions of the different pieces that pass by. This format also gives us a kind of possibility to develop dramaturgical lines. This is something we always were like puzzled that in performing arts it's evident that you have a dramaturgy. Of course, in the classical music programming you have some kind of dramaturgy too, but it's morally why do you connect this concerto with a symphony or I think here we went, or we are able to go much further in that and really develop teams and to scan the whole repertoire we have, and from the newest till 100 years ago, to see what could fit in there and what could be linked together, what could be confronted, and to play with questions and answers, to play with all different elements, factors, qualities of these musics. So it's each time a real process of research. This dramaturgical line can be developed through this type of liquid connecting of pieces. So it helped us and hopefully the audience to discover new dramaturgical possibilities, which is so common in performing arts, in dance, in theater, and for us so underdeveloped in music or classical music. It's by consequence and always, maybe I will give some examples maybe on themes that we developed like this. We had the first liquid room we did in Interfaces, had the title Sound and Vision, and it was a way of developing all links that exist between sight and sound, but how this link could be used by composers, but also by visual artists and so on. So we had works of Alexander Schubert, if you know him, where the composition takes into account also the light effect, or Kai Duncan David, another good example. But we invited also Ulla Sikle, who made with a sound artist, Jan Leguet, a performance where the dancer is standing in the middle of the space. There's one picture, but yeah, it will pass by. You see her moving arms in all colors. So it's a stroboscopic light effect that suggests that she's moving, but in fact she's moving hardly. And the sound artist is capturing just the technical on-off switch of the lamp and amplifies this as the soundtrack. And the whole question is then, is the light plot making the sound, or is the sound making the light plots? And is then the sound moving the artist or the dance, or is she just a passive element in that machinery? That's one performance that we could fit into the construction of the liquid room, which was called Sound and Vision. We liked, of course, also a bit the reference to Bowie and so on. There's some playing there, but we did a long time ago also something really purely musical on Ars Subtilior, or phrases was another another theme we developed in this. Oh, time is up. So, okay, so, but I'm at the last thing, but the video is on for another time. I know I have no conclusions even. My God, it's even. I don't know, but talking of video, I wanted to say maybe two things as a conclusion about new audience or not. I think yes, but within the art fields, of course. We are very interested in having other audiences, but within the art field, and showing music as performing arts to a performing arts audience. We see that there's much more awareness of to deal with these situations in the performing arts audiences than in the classical music audience. So there, that's a first thing. On the other hand, we see also that we were pushing the whole format of programming in classical music. I mean, production formats, the long dialogues, the investment from a whole team, curatorial, but also technically and so on. It's a big thing. So in that sense, it was pushing a bit what you could usually do. Fortunately, with the help of this kind of projects, it is possible, but it's in that sense a real laboratorium, which, as a conclusion, maybe we thought helped us making something that could get rid, it's a big ambition, I mean, or it's maybe a big statement to say so, that was leaving behind coding, codes of all kinds, and that although we were staying within this contemporary art field, I think it is something everybody could plug in. It's trying not to say this is how you should listen to it. This is not, and our experience is that indeed it is something that for many people is an eye-opener. It's also kind of a rich presentation of things to discover. It's a mini festival. And so that's what we think was the role for the Liquid Room. It's for us also each time a new way and a very good way to test repertoire.
Good afternoon. I'm very happy to be here again in Athens at the OCC, finally, for our closing conference of this beautiful happiness machine project, Interfaces project, within the scope of which the happiness machine project was developed. I will present a short movie at the end of my speech, but I will start with a short insight on Klangforum's main aims, because over the last several years Klangforum has developed lots of projects which were based on a specific understanding of contemporary music, music theater, and the function of arts in society in general. And these projects mainly targeted the classical setup of the concert, where the audience sits in front of the performers and passively enjoy what is presented to them on stage. And like Lee already said yesterday in the movie, we are very well trained to passively enjoy everything around us, but not actively engage in such an experience. And this is exactly what Klangforum tries to do with these projects, also with the Happiness Machine project, which do not invite to a passive enjoyment of the arts, but rather aim to create a space or spaces for encounter and communication, and where a high degree of attentiveness that new music requires generates an aura of reflection, which furthers joint thinking, learning, and in the best case, deliberation. So Happiness Machine is exactly on this path, and it was designed as a collaboration with the Viennese female animation film festival Tricky Women, in collaboration with further 10 European partners, one of which was the Interfaces project and the OCC. As I said, Klangforum tried to continue this path of breaking through the usual concert setup, and in order also to target new audiences and yes, to try to bring new audiences in contact with contemporary music and also socio-political themes. In case of the Happiness Machine, the content was the so-called economy of the common good theory, and the main idea was by means of new music and animated film an alternative to the prevailing capitalist economic system, namely the economy of the common good, which is recommended by the Economic and Social Committee of the European Union as a guideline for future legislation of the Union and its member states, and which should be put up for discussion through the project. So it was quite ambitious, and it took over 2 years to develop it properly with our partners. And yes, and in the course of developing this project, the concept was to bring together 10 female filmmakers and 10 female composers to work together on the concept of the economy of the common good, in close cooperation, of course, with Klangforum Wien. And they try to highlight the chances and risks of this theory, its practice, and it tries to bring it up for discussion, not only for the participants of the Happiness Machine happenings or concerts, but also to try to bring up a universal discussion within the European Union, so to say. in the Happiness Machine project, these filmmakers and composers were searching for new modes of interaction between screen and ensemble, so which then should allow for a fresh approach to reflection and participation in music and also in film. Music and film at times go their separate ways, creating different levels of communication between fixed projection and live reaction by separating these artistic forms, these two artistic forms. Happiness Machine was conceived as an encounter both on an objective and personal level with contemporary music and animated film, as well as with artistic, political and social issues. The whole Happiness Machine lasts several hours. At the premiere at the Eclat Festival, it was just, I think, 3 hours, but in its most elaborate form, so to say, the project was presented as an urbanist opera lasting 24 hours, which was premiered in October in Vienna and had a follow-up performance at the OCC here in Athens, also lasting 24 hours. And this was kind of an exploration of the common good ideas that provided the opportunity for a profound encounter, not only with music and film, but also with planning, games, lectures, conversations, food, drink, sleepovers, and if you are lucky, then with a joint awakening to alternative modes of thought. So it was designed as a kind of cathartic music theater in the best sense of the word. One main aim of the project was also to gather new audiences, so contemporary music's new position as part of an extra musical context is designed as an offer to a growing number of young people who are interested in music but not necessarily in concert and concert halls and their traditional setups and rituals. And to have, or to give you a short impression of what this Happiness Machine should be, I brought a short movie which was, it's just a 2-minute excerpt of an half-an-hour making of this whole project, and yeah, it should just give a short impression of what.
Was ist in 30 Jahren? Ich finde, das müssen wir. Natürlich.
Can you hear me? Is anybody out there?
Yes, this was really very short excerpt, but the whole making of is much longer, and we'll see it hopefully soon. Thank you.